Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening also for those attending from other continents, Europe, Africa. We have a great attendance from all over the world. I'm very excited to start Think Beyond by Reservamos SAS, the future of buses digital, our first edition virtual conference. Thank you all for signing up, and I promise that it will be a 2 full days of a lot of value to the bus sector. My name is Fernando Aguilera. I'm the head of sales and expansion at Reservamos SAS. The theme for this session is digital multi-channel strategy to accelerate our revenue growth. Translation into Spanish and Portuguese is available to select in your Zoom panel below. Our special guest for this session is Marc Hofmann, CEO and founder of Checkmybus. Thank you all for accepting my invitation. Thank you, Marc, for accepting my invitation. We're thrilled to have you. Marc, to start, the conversation, will you tell us a little bit more about Checkmybus?
Yeah, sure. Happy to do this. First of all, thank you. I'm not sure if you also hear the interpreter. Just could be.
I don't.
I have both. Okay.
Yeah,
I'll deal with it. No problem. So okay. First of all, thanks a lot for the invitation. Very happy to be here. It's a great event, great lineup, great topic. And I think it's something valuable for the business. Also, congratulations to the organization. I think you made sure that no football games of Copa Americana or European Championship are intervening. So, and maybe we have people from Argentina here also. Congratulations to your win. Quickly on Checkmybus, we are the leading global meta search for buses, for bus travel. That includes intercity buses, that includes airport buses, also shuttles, international touristic buses. We are spread across the world, and our mission is very simple. We want to make bus travel simple. And we think...
All right.
So actually, our mission is not to make event technology simple, but bus travel simple. And our firm belief is that the more users see buses across the world, the more they will also use it. So we believe that transparency for the user of the business and of the existing routes will also grow the market. And I think looking at bus in general is a market from a global perspective, which is not yet that digital. So I believe from that side, there's a lot of growth potential. We work with all distribution levels. So we work with OTAs, we work with GDSs, but we also work directly with companies to make them visible. That's a quick summary.
Yeah, it is. It is. So thank you, Marc. So before starting with the dynamic, I want to mention, the structure. So we will be discussing 3 main topics. With 10 minutes each, followed by a 5-minute Q&A and closing argument. So to start with the first main topic, which is lessons learned in post-COVID strategy for the bus sector, I want to jump into the first question. So what will be your personal view on the market situation and outlook of the bus sector?
I think post-COVID is still a bit of a difficult word at this point of time, because unfortunately the COVID levels are somewhat different in different areas of the world. But of course there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And I think at this point of time in some markets, like for example in Europe or the US, we see that COVID is more under control. And what is really interesting is that the users are coming back immediately. So it seems like pretty much, especially here, like looking at the summertime, everyone wants to travel. And so the ridership and the user numbers were going back very, very fast. We also saw that last year when we had that short break between wave number 1 and wave number 2. Of course, at that point of time, people were a little bit more afraid. Now it seems like the rise is even much faster. I just checked recently, for example, in Spain, they were back on 2019 level. So from that part, I don't think there's a fundamental change in behavior of people in the direction that they might be reluctant to travel. I think that's not there. I think this is very good news. What is also good news for the bus business, and that's also something that we see in the data, is that there is a shift towards domestic travel. I don't know if that's really sustainable. That might, of course, change over time when people are daring again to go very far and board a plane for, I don't know, 16 hours or something. But that domestic travel at the moment is really on the hype, and bus has a very strong footprint in that area. So from that side, it's definitely possible. A second factor that we see is that COVID has accelerated existing trends. And one of that trend, which started even pre-COVID, but relatively slow, was the digitization of the bus business, which was a bit slower compared to other travel vertical like flights, for example. And with COVID, this really, really went fast, especially in markets like Latin America, where the digital level were a little bit smaller than you saw in other regions. We saw even growth like in Mexico, we are 200% beyond 2019 month on month. And in Brazil, it's more than 300%. And that is coming on the one side because we won market share, which is of course good news for us. But on the other side, this is also coming because people shift their booking habits. And if you compare with discussions that we have with operators and probably with Reservamos, the other side of the business, you could also reflect this. You see that there is a shift in demand towards the online sector. And I think that will stay because it's just more convenient. And we see it in flights where more than 90% of all tickets are sold online. So this just makes sense.
Yeah, and I want to deep in that particular thing that you mentioned, which is that, I think COVID has changed a lot of the purchase behavior on travelers. So which changes do you think in the digital, strategy of a bus company they should put more attention into it, and which changes do you think will stay for the long run?
I think there's one side on the short-term changes, but I think on the long-term changes, that maybe that flips a little bit back on also on the customer behavior. I think that more than what happens from COVID is that we follow certain mega trends that are happening anyway. And I mean, we'll see probably an economic problem after COVID or even during, which might favor bus ridership because it's simply cheaper than using other modes of transportation. But one mega trend is simply the environmental crisis. And if you look at this part, there's definitely a change of mind. Maybe I jump to this a little bit later. On the short term, I think companies that have used the time of COVID to improve their digital distribution and who have become strong in that part, they will definitely win market share once the crisis is under control, depending on the region. So I think that is really key. And there are a couple of larger players that have a very digital mindset, and they have been winning market shares over time already before. And I think that could even accelerate depending on how other companies react. And I'm talking on the one side on digital distribution, which of course is key to get the buses filled again. Where this is legally possible. And on the other side, of course, the whole journey, like how you set up your product digital. And that starts really from the network planning, using tools on that side, being flexible, maybe rebuilding your network smarter. And of course, also on the revenue management side, using dynamic pricing, using smart offers and being active of that on that side, which usually is also better to be helped with digital tools. And of course, in the end, and a lot of companies have shown this also in other verticals, the key is to create loyal customers, because that's in the end an asset that you have and which help you to grow. So the more you have worked on that and the more tools you have, the better you will get out of this crisis. And I think that's definitely key. On the long run, talking about environmental crisis, if you look at how cities started to change their thoughts, even during the pandemic, how they want to operate, I think one part is very, very key that they will take away streets. and replace it by recreation, by trees, by parks, even by housing. And if you narrow down the streets in congested cities, this definitely means that you have to move from private mobility to shared mobility. This is a huge growth market. It might be bad news for Elon Musk because he's more, let's say, going towards private car on electric car, but that won't solve the problem. It's maybe a part of it. The solution is shared mobility. And if you close down the streets in the cities, of course, that will also affect intercity travel, because then it just doesn't make sense to travel by car in the center of the city anymore because you can't. So that is a huge growth potential that is ahead, and where you need all these digital tools to connect actually to distribution, to other modes of transportation. And if you have them, the growth is much more than looking at the existing market. The future market, I think, going down a few years is much, much bigger.
Great. Yeah, and we can see also that towards, the companies buying electric vehicles, hydrogen, that are, preparing for all operations and to be more environmental friendly, right? But we know in terms of, other means of transport in the world that the bus has one of the lowest carbon footprint in the entire industry. So it's a best way, and it's a good way to travel for sure. So jumping into the second main topic, which is the growth opportunities for bus sectors, for bus operators. So there's no doubt that the traveler purchase behavior has changed, as I mentioned before. E-commerce has grown drastically in almost every industry, and the bus sector is not an exception. So what are the key growth opportunities for bus operators?
There's the existing market, of course, where people, let's say, more want to move from one place to another place. But if you look at the whole travel environment, and if you look at how visible are buses actually, when you look at hotel booking sites, or when you look along this whole customer journey, you see a lack of visibility there. I think great services that exist are often not seen. We have Uber as a speaker here, and if you travel to an airport, let's say in the US, but it could also be another place of the world, a lot of people wouldn't even know where they find the bus. It will be very, very difficult for them also to book buses online. This is improving, but a lot of people know, oh, there's an Uber, I have the app. So they take this one, or they take a cab, or even they take a rental car when they want to travel to a little bit more far off travel destinations. I could name a lot of examples where people fly in a touristic region and they don't know that there's a super offer to get around. They get a rental car, which is much more expensive, simply because it's known to them. So that part of the visibility, I think, is a new market for many operators in the touristic space. It again also requires digital interfaces to grow it more. And I think there's a lot of opportunity as one example. There are, of course, more. If we look into interconnected travel, if we look into, let's say, mixed models, which go a little bit more towards the on-demand side, I think there are a lot of new business opportunities that you could look into, being digital.
For sure. First and last mile is one of them, which is not fully exploited. And it creates, a lot of value for the user, for the traveler, and also for the operator, because they control literally every aspect of, the travel per se, right? So talking about, other industries, which is also a good way to see what the other industries are, other sectors are, doing and have changed because of of COVID. So sectors such as the hospitality and air have made, the most of their loyalty program. United Airlines by itself, the loyalty program is valued in $22 billion, if I am not mistaken. So companies, so do you think there are models that the bus sector can replicate? How do you see the progress on this issue?
I'll ask you a question. How would you see, out of your experience from the SaaS side, how would you see retention rates for bus operators? or how were they before you got on board with maybe your tools, and how are they afterwards?
Right. No, I mean that's a huge opportunity to exploit, which is companies and operators in the bus sector have not fully do it yet, because to 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 construct and to develop a loyalty program allows you to, have more frequency per passenger, have more retention for passenger. So basically the conversion rate in the whole technical part of the purchase behavior growth tremendously. But not only this, is that by having a sustainable and strong loyalty program, you can also personalize your offer. And by personalizing your offer as a bus operator, you can first understand their purchase behavior, their needs, and second, offer them, specific uh, uh, promotions to their needs and to their preferences. So it's an entire business per se that can be exploited, and if you as a bus operator exploit it, you will have like tremendous benefits.
Fully agree. If you look at a lot of very, very successful brands in the mobility business, Ryanair is one, Flixbus surely is all one, like Uber, BlaBlaCar, and so forth. They were investing a lot to build communities, to build loyalty, to basically make sure that the customers stay a lot in their ecosystem once they got it. And this builds value, and this builds free traffic at the end. So I think if you look at the bus business, it is definitely helpful to go away from that thought. Okay, you have someone who brings you money, and there's a customer coming in, and then you bring from A and B, and then the product experience itself is the only thing that is relevant. I mean, product experience, of course, within the bus is very important. The service is very important. That all of this works, but it's all that happens before and that happens afterwards to bring the users back. And I think that part is mainly digital. And that part, I think, definitely needs to be developed. I don't know if you need a loyalty program, but I think, just first small movements can help a lot, that you ask people about their opinion, that you shift people maybe from your webpage to the app where you can keep them close. A lot of small opportunities would already help, but for that you need definitely your hands on the customer. I think that's definitely important as an operator to be able to do this. So this is, I think, a choice also of the different channels with different advantages, so that you combine the product experience not only during the ridership or during the ride, but you continue that product experience through the funnel until the next ride, and then make sure that the ride after the next ride stays within your own ecosystem. And of course, companies who came in the market, and the market was a lot driven, a few years ago, it was a lot driven by managing a bus itself, managing the fleet, making sure that it runs. And then a couple of companies came in with a completely different mindset. They didn't really know how to operate buses, but they were super good in marketing, in digital, and they came in and they combined this with other companies that had this strength. And that, of course, became a success model. This would also work with companies that know how to manage buses and that are willing to invest in the other side of it, but they have to.
Right. So continuing with the third main topic and last one before we start the Q&A part of the session. So which is the main topic. The third main topic is the omnichanneling sales. So I have almost 2 years of experience in the sector. Actually, I'm like 6-7 days ago to my second year birth in the sector. And I have, I had the opportunity to talk to many companies around the world, many bus companies around the world. And one particular that I have found in several companies is the lack of attention in their sales strategies. So I still find companies who have, a lot of doubts about the importance of online sales. And for example, arguing that, their travelers are not fully ready yet. There's still companies besides, all the COVID learnings and experience, there's still companies that have a lot of doubts on, putting all their effort in the digital sales part of the business. So what do you think about these? What are the most important benefits in this regard?
I think maybe there are a lot of benefits, of course, on that side, but just hooking into what you said, that let's say the worry is that customers might not be ready. I see also quite often other areas. I think a lot of companies are seeing the choice of a distribution channel as very strategic. So the question if you should go in a meta search, in an OTA, in Facebook, in whatsoever there is outside in distribution channel. And there's a lot of strategic thoughts about it to do this. And from my point of view, it doesn't really have to be strategic in an omni-channel strategy. So I did financial comparison before, and there, decisions were made on a much lower hierarchy level to try and use a channel compared to what I quite often see in the bus business, where this is usually quite often decided at relatively high levels or even a top level of companies. So I think changing that mindset and opening up to all kinds of different channels would really be helpful, because all different channels bring different benefits. Like as an example, some channels like ours, as an example, is bringing the user directly to an operator, which then of course is an easier way to convert the user into your own loyalty and into your own channel. Of course, OTAs do a great job in maximizing conversion and delivering a lot of customers into the buses. So is it good to be only on one side or the other side? No, I think both sides are relevant, and I think both sides should be used and tried depending on the strategy and depending on the focus. And if I look at channels like Google, of course, Google is a very broad distribution, but of course, in that funnel, you have to learn how to use which users and how to convert them. So that's, of course, a longer learning. And usually it can be a quite expensive channel, which might not be profitable at the first glance. So then you have to make sure that the loyalty is kicking in and you retain the users over time to make this channel profitable. So I think it's about really trying, measuring. There are easy tools, easy possibilities to look into each of these channels. It's usually not complex. And then finding out what really helps you, and then put more emphasis on those where you feel they are profitable, they are supporting your strategy, you have positive effects afterwards. But I wouldn't go for either or. Yeah, it's
Right.
none of these channels is bad. All of them are good and are helping to fill your buses. And if you don't do it, if you don't stuff also, let's say the results on any, let's say, aggregated search, like even Google with your own channels, you have others to come in and they multiply. So using different channels usually enhances your conversion all over the platform, which again makes you stronger. And larger players who are masters of this, they profit from that because they use it to a very good extent.
Great. And of course, there are many challenges also in having, a multi-sales channel strategy, because you definitely need to have a strong team in the marketing side, in the technology side, to go around all these sales channels. But what you do to what you could do to easier their level of work and activities regarding all the multi channel strategies, to basically hire people who are strong in each side, so you can have a stronger digital channel, right? So what do you think are the challenges nowadays that companies having in having this omni-channeling strategy?
If you put IT on your own shoulders, of course, to a big variant, it's, I think, everywhere in the world difficult to hire IT guys.
Right.
It's also difficult to get people on board who have a very good understanding of online marketing. There are more surely than developers. And yes, you're right. On the one side, it burns down to people. I think it definitely makes sense for bus companies of a decent size to have some people on board who have a thorough understanding understanding of this, because it takes away also the worries and the fear, and maybe also the risk that you are, let's say, over investing in certain areas and take expensive decisions, let's say externalizing technology which you probably even don't need to have this on board. But I don't think that a mid-sized bus operator does need so many people to do it, because there are a lot of services out there which are offered by many companies who have a very good tool set. And I think most of the companies that are distributing are trying to make the onboarding of an operator very easy. So as an example, for us, all the work is on more or less on our side. And we, of course, also take integrations coming from OTAs, which are already integrated. So there's a lot of possibilities to run on that with rather limited resources. And I think just starting things, testing them out for smaller operators is a valid strategy. For larger operators, that might be a bit of a different animal, depending on budgets. But I think it's easier than you would think to do it. And the process that costs most in many cases is the decision process, which usually is very complex and involves a lot of people, a lot of time, and creates a lot of costs, while others have already done it and filled their buses, while you wonder that your occupancy rate goes lower and lower over time.
Great. So Marc, we are starting now in the Q&A part. We just have 5 to 6 minutes at most. So I'm gonna select a couple questions. For the rest of the questions that left unanswered, I will personally follow the person who did the question in by email and answer along with Marc. So Marc, first question, do you offer API documentation?
I mean, we integrate APIs from others. So, and we even can work if companies don't have an API. We also offer, let's say, guidelines for companies who want to build an API to make that very easy. But in many cases, if a company has an API, we take this. If, as an example, a company doesn't have an API, we find other ways like connecting directly to the website, which we can do very efficient to onboard. Usually there's very, very limited work involved for the partner who wants to get on board.
Great. So second question, a lot of passengers are moving into the car sharing, segment. What strategies are you doing to basically search for those clients that not travel in the car sharing segment, or to try to, it's a bad word, but kind of steal those passengers that are using car sharing for basically, interdepartamental, which is like intercity or suburban. So what do you think, what strategies can you, basically recommend for intercity bus operators that are, kind of heard of this car sharing type of companies?
I assume that with car sharing, in this case, it's meant the BlaBlaCar model of car sharing, not that people basically get in a car and drive by themselves.
Right. Yeah. In the US, you have Get Around, you have in Europe and in Mexico also BlaBlaCar and models like this. Yeah.
I think there's different benefits for each channel. I mean, we work with BlaBlaCar since a very long time, and I think the model is successful. Did it really, endanger the bus side of things? I wouldn't say. I think when you looked at in Europe, there were a couple of new markets that were created because there, for example, intercity bus wasn't really there. And what usually happened is that the more attractive offers came to a market, like as in Germany or France, bus came to the market. It wasn't there before. Ride sharing was built up. So what happened in the end is that trains got up, increased their ridership, buses increased their ridership, car sharing increased their ridership, simply because the different offers with their different benefits opened up so much opportunity for the users that were normally using private car, or even in some cases planes, that the market overall for ground mobility grew. So I think if you focus on the core benefits that a bus is having compared to a rideshare, then you would win. And I think ride sharing as a, let's say, business model cannot be set up at the price that you can have for buses. It only works if people do this outside a business purpose. So I think this is the best way. Focus on your strength, and having as many modes around will grow the market.
Great. Okay, so third question, how do you recommend to create community in public transportation when users have a negative perspective of the service?
I think, of course, one should try to reduce the negative, let's say, perspective of the service. I know that sometimes in the bus business, it is a little bit more difficult because in many cases, bus itself is not like, let's say you go to a beautiful hotel, which is an emotional topic where you can create excitement easier because you have more emotional topics around. For bus, in many cases, the functionality is driving a bit more than the excitement. So that makes it sometimes more difficult. But I think if there's a problem with the service, this should definitely happen. And then, of course, it is using the positive reviews and talking with the customers and getting as many customers in your own ecosystem to work with them and to have them create positive feedback.
Great. So, Marc, thank you so much for a great discussion and accepting our invitation. A few technical difficulties at the beginning that we will for sure solve for the next session. Also, thank you all, the attendees, for joining this session. The next one, the digital transformation of companies in LATAM, starts in 20 minutes. So you cannot miss it. It's going to be very, very interesting with Bain & Company partner based in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Marc, will you like to share some final thoughts?
Yeah, first of all, thank you again for having me here. I think COVID was brutal for the business, and it still is in certain areas, maybe more than in other areas. But on the other hand, it's an accelerator, and it's an opportunity because it will help actually growth of our vertical in the end, and that's the positive side of it. But to profit from it, it requires to open for digital solution and to take them on as fast as possible. And my recommendation would be for many, especially for smaller companies, is like really do it, test it, learn from it, and make it fast and direct. I think this is key to move and to win this market. Get digital and be happy.
Fast, yeah.
Fast and be happy.
Fast and fail fast and learn fast. Yeah, it is. Thank you so much, Marc. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Fernando. Thank you, everyone. Bye.